Aodhán or Ríordáin, you have 8 minutes to second that.
Thanks very much, Cathaoirleach. I just want to start by thanking Senator Lynn Rowan for her excellent opening speech on this debate, and the Civil Engagement Group for facilitating this debate, and my own party, the Labour Party, for supporting this bill, and other parties across this House. It's very tempting on a situation like this to maybe play the political ball, but I don't think we should do that today. There is a reason why this bill won't pass second stage necessarily this evening, but I'd rather not focus on that. I think we need to focus less on the politics and more on the humanity of what we're trying to achieve here today. I think this is the most important bill that will come across this Oireachtas, and I think this is probably the most important speech I'll make in my time in the Seanad, because if what I say and what others say manage to change one mind of one person who has a potential to pass this bill further, well then I don't think I'll ever say anything more important. Drugs are everywhere in Irish society. You will find guards who in the past have taken illegal drugs. You'll find members of the judiciary in the past who have taken illegal drugs. You'll find politicians who in the past have taken illegal drugs. You'll find cabinet members in the past who have taken illegal drugs. You'll find prison officers. You'll find teachers. You'll find nurses. You'll find journalists. But none of us would ever suggest that they're criminals for, at one stage in their lives, taking an illegal drug. The reality is that this war on drugs is actually a war on the poor. It's a war on poor people. They are the ones who get criminalised. And as Senator Rowan has quite rightly said, we are criminalising marginalisation. When I spent a short time as Minister for Equality and as Minister for Drugs, I met with groups who told me from the LGBT community that when you're disconnected, you're more likely to fall into addiction. People who advocated on behalf of people with disabilities said, if you're disconnected, you're more likely to fall into addiction. People who are advocating for traveller rights who said, if you are disconnected, you're more likely to fall into addiction. And of course, we know that deprivation causes people to fall into addiction. The opposite to addiction is not sobriety. The opposite to addiction is connection. And we're not going to connect people with mainstream society if we give them a criminal sanction. It's just not working. I would plead with anybody who thinks that it is working or is pushing anybody away from addiction or from drug use to take a trip down to any court you choose, or in particular the drug court, and what you will find is a room full of sick people in a courtroom. But worse than that, you will find a courtroom full of sick, poor people. So there is a level of power involved in this, and it's not just politics that has to blame for not moving sooner on this. But we have come a long way in a short period of time, in my view. It's only a short number of weeks ago, Minister, you sat in that chair and we together passed, without amendment, the injecting centre legislation. Groundbreaking stuff that's going to save lives. But there is a common perception, a common mistrust, a dehumanisation of the addict. And all those groups that I've named earlier, the LGBT community, the travelling community, people with disabilities, asylum seekers, poor people, we all know the names that they used to be called. Disparaging names, dehumanising names, undermining names that are not used in common usage anymore. But you can still call somebody a junkie any hour of the day on any media outlet and get away with it. You can probably use it in this chamber and in the other chamber and not be censored for it. There was a young man who died of an overdose in St Audhine's Park in November 2015. The person who found him dead rang the emergency services and said, it's just another junkie. So what we're really dealing with here is power. And the power that we actually think that people in addiction have and their families have. Because what we've managed to do by criminalising them is making them full of shame. and they won't come forward and talk about the services that they need. They won't come forward and talk about the lives that they're living, because criminalisation is shaming them, and we're actually shaming people into graves. We have the third highest overdose rate in Europe. And if this was working, our statistics would show something completely different. So what myself and Lynn Rowan and the Civil Engagement Group and other parties here are not trying to engage in some liberal loony fest. What we're actually trying to do here, because we do believe, many of us, in having a drug-free society, but we are realists. And we know that drugs are everywhere, and we know that people are going to continue to take them. But it's how we deal with that person who is sucked into addiction is the key. Do we have that person interface with a guard, a judge, in a courtroom or a prison? Or do we say, you are better off to deal with a doctor, with a counsellor, with a persuasion service? Do we think a young person from a disadvantaged area with a broken home, who begins dabbling in drug use, who gets a criminal sanction, do we really think that that person is going to change their ways? Because if I got a criminal conviction as a teenager or somebody in my early 20s, I think I would probably say, that's me done. Society has just made their decision on me. But I would also know that I've only got this criminal sanction because I'm poor. So what I would say to members of this House is that we're trying to deal with here is one of the biggest killers in Irish society. It's one of the biggest killers in Irish society, and it's also one of the biggest lies. The war on drugs is a lie. It can't be won. It's a war on people, and it's a war on a certain type of people. So when we say decriminalisation, and it's a word that gets us in trouble all the time, because people think we're talking about legalisation, which we're not. We're talking about decriminalisation of the person, not of the drug, of the person. Take the person out of the criminal justice system and deal with addiction in the way it should be dealt with. It's not about the substances. It's about the issues and connection. So with that, Cathaoirleach, I hope my words have gone some way to convincing people of what they should do in this regard and in regard to this debate. I want to finish by thanking those who have educated me along this road. People from Citywide, people from Anna Liffey, the USI who are also in support of this move, and also Father Peter McVerry, I might suggest as well, who told me at a public meeting I had in my constituency recently that he was in court with a young man last year who was charged with possession of cannabis to the worth of €2. What a complete and utter waste of time. Our criminal justice system should be targeted at the pushers, not the takers of drugs.
Senator